What if I told you a king was bold enough to steal the sun, and actually did it? In the heart of the African village, the sun reigned as a benevolent guardian, casting its golden light over the land. Fields shimmered with ripe crops, nurtured by the sun's warmth, while the river sparkled like liquid diamonds under its glow. Children ran barefoot across the earth, laughing and shouting as they played, their small shadows stretching behind them. Women knelt by the riverbank, their hands busy with colorful fabrics that mirrored the brilliance of the sunlight. Men worked tirelessly in the fields, their strong arms cutting through the soil, assured that the sun's rays would bless their labor with abundant harvests. The village thrived, and the sun's presence was not merely appreciated, it was revered, seen as the heart that beat life into their world. On the day of the Sun Festival, the village buzzed with excitement. Dancers adorned in vibrant attire swirled and leapt to the rhythm of beating drums, each movement a joyous tribute to the life-giving rays. Children ran between rows of tables laden with food, brightly colored fruits, steaming bowls of stew, and freshly baked bread. Elders gathered under the ancient baobab tree, their voices weaving tales of the sun's first appearance in the skies and the blessings it had brought to their ancestors. Women braided each other's hair and sang songs that praised the light that filled their days, while men crafted intricate designs on ceremonial drums. It was a day of unity, where every villager expressed gratitude for the sun, their radiant guardian and eternal source of life. Life in the village was a symphony orchestrated by the cycles of the sun. At dawn, its first rays kissed the earth awake, stirring the villagers into motion. Women stretched colorful clothes to dry beneath its warmth, their laughter blending with the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Farmers tilled the soil and sowed seeds, confident that the sun would nurture their efforts. As midday arrived, children gathered by the riverbank, skipping stones and chasing each other's reflections in the sparkling water. By evening, the village settled into peace as the sun sank below the horizon, leaving behind an orange glow that whispered promises of tomorrow. In this rhythm, the villagers knew no fear or hardship. The sun was their constant companion, a beacon of harmony and hope. Far beyond the bustling village, the king stood on the balcony of his grand palace, his eyes fixed on the blazing sun. He envied its brilliance, the way it touched every corner of his kingdom, shining freely for all to enjoy. A seed of discontent took root in his heart. Why, he thought, should such a magnificent treasure remain unclaimed, shared among peasants and nobles alike? The sun's power was unmatched, and its warmth seemed to mock him with its freedom. As his advisors shuffled into the hall, he began to speak of an idea, a way to bring the sun under his control. Whispers of hesitation filled the room, but the king's determination silenced all dissent. His greed grew like a shadow, darkening his thoughts and setting a plan in motion. The king stood atop his grand palace, his eyes locked on the blazing sun that ruled the skies. It burned with an untouchable brilliance, casting its light across his vast kingdom. Yet, despite his wealth and power, the king felt a gnawing emptiness. How could he, a ruler of such magnificence, allow something so mighty to remain beyond his grasp? The sun's golden light mocked him, shining freely for all, peasants and nobles alike. His envy grew with every passing day, a shadow within his heart, whispering that the sun should be his and his alone. Summoning his advisors to the great hall, The king spoke of his desire to claim the sun. The room fell silent, his words too audacious to comprehend. "Your Majesty, the sun is beyond mortal reach," one advisor dared to say. But the king's voice cut through their doubts like a blade. "Then we shall find a way," he declared, his tone brooking no opposition. The advisors, bound by duty and fear, reluctantly began to ponder the unthinkable. The king's greed loomed over them like a storm cloud, its pressure forcing them into complicity. The king retreated to his private chambers, where ancient texts lay scattered across a table. These were relics of his ancestors, filled with forbidden magic and dark secrets. With growing determination, the king sifted through the brittle pages, searching for a way to ensnare the sun. His fingers trembled as he uncovered a spell of immense power, a ritual that could bind even the heavens. As he read, a sinister grin spread across his face. The spell would require great preparation, but it promised him the ultimate prize, the sun itself. Under the cover of darkness, the palace buzzed with activity. The king's orders were clear, and his servants worked tirelessly to prepare for the ritual. Rare artifacts were gathered: golden chains, shimmering crystals, and a pedestal engraved with arcane symbols. The advisors, now fully complicit, drew the ritual circle in the heart of the palace. The king watched over the preparations with a mixture of pride and impatience. His greed was no longer a mere thought. It had become a force driving him forward, blind to the consequences of his ambition. The night was eerily silent as the ritual commenced in the heart of the palace. The golden chains shimmered under the flickering light of torches, and the engraved pedestal stood ready to bear the sun's captured essence. The king, robed in ceremonial garments, stepped into the circle drawn with glowing symbols. With the ancient spellbook in hand, he chanted words long forgotten by time. The air grew heavy, crackling with energy as the magic reached out, unseen forces weaving together in preparation for an unthinkable act. As the final chant echoed through the palace, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The spell pierced the heavens, its power clawing at the very fabric of nature. The sun's light dimmed, flickering like a candle caught in the wind. Then, with a blinding burst, its brilliance was torn from the sky, captured within the golden orb that rested on the pedestal. Darkness fell instantly, covering the world in an unnatural, suffocating blackness. The king held the orb aloft, at its faint glow a mockery of the sun's former glory, and declared his triumph. Panic spread through the village as the sun disappeared. Women clutched their children close, their faces pale with fear. Crops that once stood proud under the sun's warmth began to wilt, their leaves curling as if mourning the lost light. Rivers grew cold, their sparkling surfaces replaced by chilling stillness. The villagers gathered in the square, their voices trembling as they prayed for the sun's return. But their prayers seemed to vanish into the empty darkness that had swallowed their world. Amid the despair, Kwame sat quietly by the dying fire in his family's hut. He was a young man of humble beginnings, but his heart burned with determination. As his grandmother, a wise elder of the village, whispered stories of the sun's ancient ties to life, Kwame's resolve grew. "The sun is more than light," she told him. "It is life itself. Without it, all will perish." Kwame knew then what he had to do. Clutching the talisman his grandmother pressed into his hand, he vowed to find the sun and restore its light to his people. In the quiet warmth of their hut, Kwame sat with his grandmother, whose eyes carried the weight of wisdom passed through generations. She spoke of the sun's sacred bond to life, a force that connected earth, water, and air. Her voice trembled as she told him of a distant path, one that could lead to reclaiming the stolen light. "Follow the river until it vanishes into shadows," she whispered, placing an ancient talisman in his hands. "This will protect you, but courage must guide your heart." Kwame listened intently, his resolve hardening as the flames of the dying fire mirrored the spark of determination in his eyes. Kwame set out to gather what little he could for the perilous journey ahead. He filled a small sack with dried fruits, a flask of water, and the talisman, a token of his lineage and a reminder of his grandmother's wisdom. At the village square, his neighbors watched silently, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. The elders offered prayers for protection, while the children, too young to understand the gravity of his mission, waved goodbye with innocent smiles. As Kwame took his first steps beyond the familiar bounds of the village, the weight of their expectations pressed upon him, but it only strengthened his resolve. The river led him to the edge of a dense forest, where shadows danced ominously between the towering trees. Kwame hesitated, gripping the talisman tightly as the air grew thick and cold. The forest seemed alive, whispering warnings in the rustling leaves. Step by step, Kwame pushed forward, his senses heightened by the unknown. Strange sounds surrounded him, chirps, growls, and the creak of branches, and his heartbeat quickened. Yet, amid the darkness, he recalled his grandmother's words. "Courage must guide your heart." With renewed determination, he pressed deeper into the maze of shadows. Night fell as Kwame entered the heart of the forest, and the path vanished into complete darkness. Suddenly, a towering figure emerged, a guardian of the forest with glowing eyes and a voice like thunder. It demanded Kwame to turn back, declaring that the journey ahead would lead to ruin. But Kwame, fueled by the thought of his village struggling in darkness, stood firm. "I seek the sun," he said, his voice unwavering. The guardian, sensing the purity of his mission, stepped aside. "May your courage sustain you," it said as it melted into the shadows. Kwame continued, the talisman glowing faintly as if to light his way. Kwame emerged from the shadowy forest into a clearing illuminated by a faint, silvery glow. Sitting at the center was an elder, cloaked in a robe adorned with stars and symbols that seemed to shimmer like the night sky. The elder's eyes were piercing yet kind as they beckoned Kwame to sit. "You walk a dangerous path," the elder said, their voice deep and resonant. Kwame shared his mission, and the elder nodded solemnly. They handed him a small charm, shaped like a sun, and spoke cryptic words. "This will guide you when darkness clouds your way. But remember, courage and wisdom must work as one." As Kwame left the clearing, the sound of flapping wings drew his attention. A vibrant, fearless bird with plumage like fire landed before him. It hopped closer, tilting its head as if studying him. Kwame extended his hand, and the bird perched confidently on his shoulder. It chirped in a way that felt more like words than sound, guiding Kwame toward a winding path through rocky terrain. Along the way, the bird darted ahead and returned, alerting him to hidden dangers: a loose boulder, a venomous snake, and steep cliffs. Though the journey was treacherous, the bird's vigilance became an invaluable asset. The sky above darkened, and a fierce storm erupted, lashing the land with icy winds and torrential rain. Kwame struggled to find shelter, his strength tested by the unrelenting force of nature. As thunder roared and lightning illuminated the barren landscape, fear crept into his heart. But the charm given by the elder glowed faintly, and Kwame felt warmth spreading through his chest. With each step forward, he reminded himself of the villagers waiting in darkness, their lives depending on his resolve. He pressed on, enduring the storm until it finally subsided, leaving him drenched but undeterred. Exhausted, Kwame stumbled into a quiet grove, where the air felt still and sacred. He knelt by a small spring to drink, his reflection shimmering in the water's surface. For the first time, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on his journey. The weight of his mission was immense, yet he realized that each trial had made him stronger. The forest, the bird, and the storm had taught him resilience, and the elder's wisdom had begun to take root in his heart. As the sun-shaped charm glowed softly in his hand, he felt his courage solidify. Rising to his feet, Kwame knew he was ready for whatever lay ahead. After days of traversing treacherous terrain, Kwame finally reached the king's palace. The structure loomed high above the barren land, its dark spires piercing the dull sky. The walls shimmered with an unnatural, eerie glow that seemed to pulse with the faint light of the captured sun. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their expressions hard and unyielding. Kwame crouched behind a rocky outcrop, studying the layout and observing their movements. The weight of his mission pressed heavily on his shoulders, but his determination burned brighter than ever. Kwame waited for nightfall, when the darkness cloaked the palace like a shroud. Using the lessons of patience and observation he had learned on his journey, he crept past the guards with silent steps. The talisman glowed faintly, guiding him through hidden pathways that seemed to reveal themselves just when he needed them most. As he slipped through a narrow entrance at the base of the palace, Kwame felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the king's greed and the orb that imprisoned the sun. The grand throne room was an imposing sight, its walls adorned with golden treasures that reflected the faint glow of the captured sun. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it rested the orb, glowing dimly with a muted brilliance. Kwame's breath caught as he took in the sight. The orb was smaller than he had imagined, yet it pulsed with an overwhelming power. The room was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum that seemed to emanate from the orb itself. Kwame approached cautiously, his heart pounding as he prepared for what lay ahead. Before Kwame could reach the orb, a deep, resonant voice echoed through the throne room. The king emerged from the shadows, his figure tall and imposing. "So, you've come for the sun," he said, his tone a mix of amusement and disdain. Kwame froze, gripping the talisman tightly in his hand. The king's eyes gleamed with arrogance as he stepped closer, his regal robes trailing behind him. "You think you can challenge me? You, a mere villager?" Kwame squared his shoulders, meeting the king's gaze with unwavering resolve. "The sun belongs to all, not to you alone," he replied, his voice steady, despite the fear coursing through him. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the world. Kwame stood firm in the face of the king, his talisman glowing faintly in his hand. The king's imposing figure loomed closer, his arrogance filling the room like a suffocating fog. "You dare to challenge me?" The king sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Kwame's heart raced, but he held his ground. "I don't challenge you for myself," he said, his voice steady. "I do this for my people, for the life stolen from them. The sun belongs to all, not to one." The king's laughter echoed through the hall, but beneath his mocking tone, there was a flicker of uncertainty. The two engaged in a battle, not of swords but of words. Kwame spoke of the suffering in the village, of the withered crops and frozen rivers, of children who cried in the endless darkness. His words painted vivid pictures of the lives the king's greed had destroyed. The king, though unmoved at first, began to falter as Kwame's passion pierced through his defenses. "You speak of sacrifice," the king countered, "but what is a king if not the master of all he sees?" Kwame's response was calm but unwavering. "A true king serves his people, not his pride." Frustrated by Kwame's resolve, the king resorted to intimidation. With a wave of his hand, he conjured illusions of flames and shadows, their menacing forms swirling around Kwame. The air grew cold, and the ground beneath him trembled, but Kwame remained steadfast. He clutched the talisman, its warmth a shield against the king's dark magic. "Your tricks won't deter me," Kwame said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The king's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it seemed as though he might strike. But something in Kwame's unwavering gaze gave him pause. As the illusions faded, the king stared at Kwame in silence. For the first time, he saw not a mere villager, but a young man with a spirit unbroken by fear. The king turned his gaze to the orb, its faint glow a reminder of his conquest. Doubt began to creep into his mind, unbidden but persistent. Could it be that he had gone too far? The memory of his kingdom in its former glory, vibrant and alive under the sun's embrace, surfaced in his thoughts. He shook his head, trying to banish the feeling, but the seed of doubt had taken root. The confrontation was far from over, but the king's resolve had begun to crack. The king sat in his grand throne, staring at the golden orb that imprisoned the sun. Its faint glow no longer brought him the satisfaction he had expected. His hands rested on the armrests, heavy with the weight of what he had done. Memories of the sunlit kingdom flooded his mind, fields brimming with life, rivers sparkling with warmth, and the laughter of his people. Now his land was desolate, shrouded in an unending darkness. He turned his gaze toward Kwame, whose steady presence stirred something within him, a feeling he had not known in years. Regret. Kwame stood before the king, his voice calm but filled with determination. "You have the power to change this," he said, his eyes locked on the ruler. "You can undo the damage and bring back the light." The king looked down at his hands, once symbols of control, now shaking with doubt. The orb glowed faintly on its pedestal, as if waiting for his decision. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of the moment. Finally, the king rose from his throne, his movements slow and deliberate. "If I release the sun," he said, his voice trembling, "can I undo the suffering I have caused?" The king stepped toward the orb, his robes trailing behind him. Kwame watched as the ruler extended his hand, pausing for a brief moment before lifting the glowing artifact. The room seemed to hold its breath as the king raised the orb high and brought it down with all his strength. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the throne room, and a blinding light exploded outward, filling every corner with its brilliance. The sun's warmth and light returned, bursting through the palace windows and illuminating the land beyond. Kwame shielded his eyes, but his heart soared as he felt the life-giving warmth on his skin once more. As the light faded to a gentle glow, the king stood amidst the shattered remnants of the orb, his shoulders slumped. Tears streamed down his face, not from fear but from the realization of what he had almost destroyed. He turned to Kwame, his voice breaking. "I have been blinded by my greed," he admitted. "You showed me what I could not see myself." Kwame stepped forward, placing a hand on the king's shoulder. "It's never too late to choose the right path," he said. The king nodded, a humbled man who now understood the true meaning of power, not in possession, but in service. Together, they walked out of the palace, the sun shining brightly above them. The golden rays stretched across the sky, breathing life into the barren land. Villagers stepped outside, their faces tilted upward, basking in the long-lost warmth. Flowers unfurled, rivers gleamed, and laughter bubbled in the streets once more. The kingdom stirred from its long darkness, embracing the rebirth of light. The king stood at the palace gates, watching the transformation unfold. He turned to Kwame, the man who had confronted him without fear. "I have taken much," he said, his voice raw with honesty. "But what can I give in return?" Kwame smiled, the answer already clear. "You lead them, not with power, but with wisdom and kindness. The people do not need a ruler. They need a guardian." Days passed, and the king no longer sat on his throne, but walked among his people. He listened, he learned, he rebuilt. The palace doors remained open, a sign that he would never shut the world away again. And at the heart of it all stood Kwame, a quiet guide who had changed the fate of an entire kingdom, not by force, but by truth. As the sun set, its golden hues reflected off the palace walls. But this time, the light did not fade into darkness. It remained, not trapped within an orb, not controlled by a single man, but free, as it was always meant to be. The kingdom thrived, and so did its people. And as the stars blinked into existence, the humbled king looked to Kwame and said, "This time, let the light guide us forward." We hope you enjoyed today's story. Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. That's all for today. Take care, folks.